Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. And this, in the USS Missouri, is Bri-Fi. Now, I don't know whether or not Bri-Fi is a new owner of the Missouri with the nerfed credit income, or an old owner of the Missouri with the 17% credit buff, which has been rigorously tested to ensure that existing owners of the Missouri don't lose out over what they previously earned with the ship. Wait, what's that? Okay, a 20% credit buff that's been rigorously tested to ensure... Wait, what? Okay, we'll make it a 30% credit buff, which hopefully got tested a bit more rigorously than the 17% or 20% buffs, and yes, we are actually honestly expected to believe that Wargaming are so hopelessly incompetent that they can't manage to do basic mathematics on the numbers that they themselves generated. The alternative, of course, is that they've just been lying to us all along. But earning credits is not going to be the biggest problem that Bri-Fi is going to have in this battle. Because as you can see, he's got slightly bigger problems right now. Yes, the arse of his ship is stuck inside that island. Go on then, Wargaming. I can't wait for this one. Explain that. You've been tinkering with the maps for submarines again, haven't you? Yeah. Didn't bother changing the spawn points, did you? No. Well, anyway, moving on swiftly to today's main event sees the return of everybody's favourite World of Warships player, Dave, in the USS Ohio. He is trying to fool us by going by some particularly unpronounceable name in this battle, but we all know who it really is. Today, Dave is going to be giving us a practical demonstration of one of Murphy's laws of combat, specifically the one that says never interrupt the enemy when they're making a mistake. Now that doesn't mean to say that Dave's going to be playing badly. I mean, this is Dave after all. He usually plays pretty well, and he's going to be playing pretty well today, pushing in quite aggressively with the USS Ohio. The secondaries on this ship are no joke. But it's really going to be more about watching the enemy team make the kind of boneheaded mistakes and turning themselves into nothing more than dirty, great big fat credit and XP pinatas purely for Dave's benefit, and of course, Dave is going to be taking full advantage of that. While we wait for things to heat up, I just wanted to spend a minute or two talking about the latest torpedo bug. So I discussed this in yesterday's Mingles with Jingles, and I'm not going to go into details describing the bug. I did that yesterday in Mingles with Jingles, and plenty of other people have given it lots of screen time as well. But what I did want to talk about is something that I find particularly hilarious. First, I'm going to have to ask you to cast your minds back to, all of nearly 2 weeks ago. Wargaming's important message to the community, the apology statement. Specifically the part where they said, and I'm quoting Wargaming here, "We will create a series of publications to make our development process more transparent and to show the logic behind what we do. For example, players did not understand why the latest torpedo bug took 2 updates to fix. Well, technically it was 3. While an aircraft carrier bug was fixed almost instantly. They are in fact very different. The aircraft carrier bug was fixed by quickly adjusting some parameters, while the torpedo bug involved game logic, and even though it was technically fixed within a week, it had to go through all regular quality assurance processes." Leaving aside the whole question of how come the aircraft carrier fix they talked about didn't have to go through the same rigorous testing process as the torpedo bug fix, the torpedo fix which did go through regular quality assurance processes still managed to screw up torpedoes again. So they identified and fixed this problem 2.5 months ago, but kept it in rigorous testing and still didn't spot the new bug, which we spotted within days of it going live. We interrupt today's video to take you live to St. Petersburg, where the World of Warships QA team are hard at work attempting to nail this latest bug down. Yep, that's what 2.5 months of rigorous internal testing is worth. Anyway, back to the battle where Dave is trying to push up and get into the cover of the island over there so he's not exposed to this increasing crossfire. He has not, however, noticed, although his secondary started firing, and that's what dragged his attention to the fact that there is an enemy destroyer on his flank. Now, the Ohio only has 3 consumables: damage control, damage repair, and spotter plane. It doesn't have hydro. But you don't need hydro to know that there are torpedoes on the way when an extremely obvious smoke screen appears on your flank like that. He's managed to dodge every single one of them. Some radar right now, however, would be extremely useful because, well, he's reloaded the high explosive and the Ohio secondaries are deadly to destroyers. The Dmitry Donskoy down to the south obliges. Oh, look at him, he's trying to sneak back into the smoke. You don't really seem to understand how radar works, do you? There's mistake number one. Don't worry, plenty more where that one came from. The Ohio, by the way, while it is technically a premium ship, is a ship that you can obtain for free just by grinding it out in the Research Bureau. As well as its devastating secondaries, it's also armed with 18-inch guns. And while they're not quite as big as the Yamato's guns, they are capable of overmatching up to 30mm of armor plating. Something that the suicidal Siegfried over there, with its 27mm of bow plating, definitely does not have. Although it does have 30mm of deck plating, but that doesn't matter because the Ohio has 457mm guns and can overmatch that too. So, what exactly is it that the Siegfried thinks he's going to accomplish here? Has he just blundered around the corner, not realising what was lying in wait for him, and he's going to try to duck into cover in the gap between those two islands up ahead? It looks like it. No. No, this was actually a planned move from the Siegfried, who Dave can't shoot at right now, so he's switching targets to the broadsiding Missouri instead. The Siegfried, despite being one of these newfangled battle cruisers armed with 381mm guns, doesn't seem to realise that he's in a Siegfried and thinks he's in a Paolo Emilio instead, or a Yolo Emilio, or a Paolo Emiliolo, whatever you want to call it. The kind of destroyer that, while it is an extremely risky tactic, can have the potential to have extremely high rewards if you do a YOLO torpedo rush, but what the Siegfried doesn't seem to understand is he's not in a Paolo Emilio. So he rushes in, launches 8 torpedoes, 4 from each side. He manages to score hits with 3, doesn't sink Dave, and all it cost him was 62,850 health and his tier 9 cruiser. Not sure it was worth it. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and call that one mistake number 2. Now, Dave has lost a lot of health here, but he's definitely still in the fight. He's completely safe from any torpedoes that may have been launched by that Kitakaze, thanks to the way the islands form a sort of slalom here. Very difficult to launch torpedoes down successfully. Wait, what was that Dmitry Donskoy doing? Don't have time to worry about that right now. We've got a Kitakaze that needs sinking. He's clearly blitzing out of there at full speed with his engine boost running. Actually, I want to take a closer look at this Dmitry Donskoy. He attempted to... What is it about cruisers that are armed with torpedoes? This is something that you tend to see particularly with Yoshino players who seem to think that they're playing Shimikazes for some absurd reason. But it's by no means confined to them. You just saw the Siegfried doing it, and well, right now we're watching the Dmitry Donskoy attempting and failing to do it on the enemy Missouri. He's all the way out there on the flank with no concealment whatsoever, dogfighting a Missouri with another Missouri, a Mogami and a Kitakaze shooting at him. The only thing he can possibly do to hope to salvage this situation is to ram that Missouri, and he's managed to get that wrong as well. I mean, yeah, the Missouri's equally badly out of position, but the Donskoy hasn't managed to capitalise on that. I bet you Dave can, though. Shot out. There we go. There's his first kill. Oh, and a new achievement. There must be something special going on the North American server. Dave, of course, taking advantage of the momentary distraction that the Dmitry Donskoy is still providing before his inevitable and completely pointless death, to creep forward and get some more cover between himself and the other Missouri, who is closing in, the Mogami in the distance there, and the Kitakaze, who's gone undetected thanks to the totally predicted demise of the Dmitry Donskoy and his associated radar. He launches his spotter plane in an attempt to reacquire that Kitakaze, but, well, with the Missouri on the other side of the island, that spotter plane is going to last seconds. In fact, I'm surprised that it took that long for the Missouri to shoot it down. I guess he must have lost some of his anti-aircraft guns. Now, there's the Kitakazi again, and this is where Dave makes his only really questionable decision in the heat of the moment. He's turning left, because he wants to finish off the Megami. But this is also going to expose him to fire from the Missouri and present a nice big fat broadside, and he's got the Megami, a nice big fat broadside for the Kitakazi to launch torpedoes at. And the only thing that saves Dave here is that the Kitakazi's aim wasn't great and his reload booster wasn't up. If Dave had turned right, and I'm not entirely sure how the Missouri thought he was going to survive that, so we'll call that mistake number 3. If Dave had turned right, however, he would have been given broadside to the Missouri, so he kind of had to choose between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea there. Eat some torpedoes, or risk getting citadeled by the Missouri. As it happens, it turned out that he made the correct choice. Meanwhile, the Kitakazi is making a very bad choice. We'll call what the Missouri did mistake number 3, and what the Kitakazi is doing right here is definitely mistake number 4, because the second he failed to sink Dave, he should have started boogieing the hell on out of there. Instead, he stuck around inside his smokescreen. Dave's closing in, he switched to high explosive because, be very, very quiet, we're hunting destroyers. And of course he's got his secondaries as well. Yep, left it way too late to get out of there. I mean, the Kitakazi isn't a particularly fast ship at the best of times, even with its engine boost running. But he did have the time to get out of there. And instead he chose to sit inside his smokescreen, taking pot shots of Dave when he should have boogied on out the second his torpedoes failed to kill him. So that's 4 critical errors that Dave has benefited from so far in this game. The game, however, still could go either way. The scores are very close, the kills are very close, and both teams only possess 1 capture circle. So while Dave is catching his breath and waiting for this fire to go out, and he is very, very low on health and still getting shot at, which isn't good. Let's take some pot shots at the Salem. The Salem is in open water and is basically broadsiding Dave here, and that was a very risky move announcing his position like that, but, well, I'm going to call that a calculated risk because the Salem was able to get several salvos off. He only risked 1 return salvo and managed to get into cover behind the island over there, so a risky move, but it did pay off. Didn't pay off as handsomely as the Salem may have hoped because he wasn't able to set subsequent fires. Dave is still alive, although he has burned his last heal, which, thanks to the critical torpedo and citadel damage that he'd suffered, was only able to recover a tiny fraction of his outstanding health. So that wasn't a mistake that the Salem made. It was a risk, but it was a risk that paid off, in the sense that even if it didn't result in the kill that he may have been hoping for, he at least managed to pull it off without sacrificing his ship by eating a whole bunch of citadels broadside on in open water. Oh, that would be the enemy Fantask, well inside torpedo range. Unfortunately, Dave had armor piercing loaded because he's expecting to have to shoot at a Salem. He's inside secondary range. What is he doing? Oh yeah, first set of torpedoes missed. And is he turning around to get torpedoes away from the other side? I can't remember where the Fantask's torpedo launchers are located. It's possible. Oh, hang on a minute. Really? Really? That's your plan, is it, Salem? Okay, we are calling that one mistake number 5. And the Fantask, continuing to sail around in circles within secondary range of an Ohio, yeah, we're going to call that mistake number 6, even if it wasn't Dave who killed him. Do you notice that there's a Gibraltar on the enemy team, by the way? British Tier 10 extremely heavy cruiser? I completely failed to mention that at the beginning of the battle. There he is. Didn't think they were out yet. I suppose that must be a super tester. Well, while Dave is repositioning, I thought I'd take the time to stop and talk about secondaries. Not the Ohio's secondaries in particular, although the Ohio does have very good secondaries, but secondaries in general. Do you remember the commander skill rework? I know, there have been a few, and there are more on the way. No, yes, it can be hard to keep track. I'm talking about the original one, where a whole bunch of us pointed out that Deadeye in particular was the most stupid skill imaginable and was going to have massively negative effects on the game, and also you appear to have killed secondary builds, and Wargaming said, no, it'll be fine, you don't know what you're talking about. So they went ahead and released it, and Deadeye was the most stupid skill imaginable and had massive negative effects on gameplay, and yeah, secondary builds were dead. So a couple of months went by, and they released a rework of the rework, which removed Deadeye completely, but did nothing to address secondary builds. And we said, so about those secondary builds, and they said, no, secondary builds are fine. There's the Thunderer given a nice flat broadside. That's not actually a mistake. The Thunderer is preoccupied with all kinds of other problems at the moment, but the fact that he is going to continue to give a nice flat broadside, despite getting bitch slapped like that, and continuing to do nothing about it when he could sink Dave very, very easily, that is definitely a mistake. But back to secondary builds. So they removed Deadeye, but continued to deny that there was anything wrong with secondary builds, and a few more months go by, and then they announced that they're going to do a rework of the rework of the rework, and they're going to be looking at buffing secondaries. Hang on a minute. We told you 6 months ago that secondaries were dead, to which you insisted they were fine. To which they replied, well, yes, but you see, oh, look, over there, a pony in a Missouri-shaped loot box. And there's Dave's 6th kill to go with his Confederate. High caliber, Kraken Unleashed, and devastating strike. Most of which wouldn't have been possible, or would have been significantly harder to achieve, if he'd been ignoring Murphy's laws of combat, and been rude enough to interrupt the enemy when they were making all of those critical mistakes. That's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.